Welcome to Born or Made, the podcast that dives deep into the heart of success and identity. Are the traits that define us as leaders ingrained from birth, or are they carved out throughout our experiences? Join your host, Anne-Marie Latulip, as we ask these questions to some of the most insightful and inspiring entrepreneurs of our time. Each episode, we explore their journeys, the decisions that shaped them, and how they've molded their own paths to success. So whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned business owner, or simply curious about the interplay between nature and nurture in professional growth, you're in the right place. Get ready for compelling stories, transformative insights, and a new perspective on what it really takes to make it in the world of entrepreneurship.
Welcome back to the Born or Made podcast. I'm your host, Anne-Marie Latulip, and I have with me today the amazing Martha Kartaoui. And I'll tell you a little bit about Martha. She is a highly accomplished certified life and health coach, as well as a respected spiritual mentor and a life visionary. She's the owner of PIC Wellness, LLC, with a remarkable personality and a personal journey as a survivor of a religious cult. I'm going to stop there, Martha, because I'm sure everyone listening is very curious about that. So I would love it if you would take just a few minutes and tell us about your story and how you got to be where you are today.
Yeah. So thank you so much for having me, by the way, Anne-Marie. This is a pleasure. So, my story, I was born and grew up in a religious cult. And I was there until age 25 when I escaped and decided I was going to take my life back. I didn't know what that meant. And within the religious cult, we were isolated, we were manipulated, we were brainwashed, and I experienced excessive abuse, spiritually, sexually, physically, verbally, psychologically, all of that during those first 25 years. And so entering the real world after 25 years in the cult is a real wake up call. And I really felt like I just got smacked in the face with, you don't belong. Who are you? I had no identity, no self-worth, and I had to navigate this big, scary world on my own. And so that's a snippet.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Okay. I have so many questions. So did you say you were born into that cult?
Yes.
Okay. So at what point did you realize, wait, this isn't how everybody else lives? This is a little off. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Sure. So I think from a young age, I knew we were different, but I thought it was like a good thing to be different, because we were the chosen people. We had the secret sauce. We were the ones that God loved the most that put us in this group, right? That's the mentality growing up. I didn't realize that it was a bad thing or that we were being manipulated and isolated and brainwashed and kept away from our extended families, or I didn't understand because it was all I knew. It was, the cult was all I knew. So you don't know what you don't know until you find out you don't know it.
Right.
And so for me, I didn't really realize that it wasn't a normal thing to be part of until I rebelled in my teens. And then I was like, but then still, he was so engulfed and clenched into all of our everything that we did that it was like, well, I'm the problem. He's not the issue, right? I just have a rebellious heart, or I'm just not. I'm not close enough to God to understand, his place, being the leader, right? And so I felt like I was the one that was sinning against God, not that this cult was bad, right? Because I didn't know it was a cult at that time.
Wow. That is amazing how someone has that much power. I'm guessing, or maybe I'm assuming, but was it, a typical situation where, I don't know what's typical, but where there were multiple wives? Is that?
No. So ours was not set up that way.
Okay.
It's very similar to any kind of cult documentary that you've watched on Hulu or Netflix. There's so many characteristics that are indicative of a cult leader. And some of those characteristics, which were the ones we fall under, was the isolation, was the secrets, right? Keeping you away from your extended family, the manipulation of whatever he said went, the brainwashing. No matter how outrageous of the things that he said, you believed him because he placed himself in like the position of God. And so, you know, he was our mediator or intercessor between God and ourselves. So we told him all of our secrets. He helped, you know, he made all of the decisions in our lives about whether to buy a house or whether to buy a car, or, you know, what to name your children, you know, like all these decisions were made by him. So yes, there was a component of him, you know, having sex with other people in the group outside of his wife, but he didn't take other wives at that time.
Okay. Wow. You know, it's the one I can keep thinking about is Waco, because I got, you know, really involved in that documentary when it came out, just because of just how interesting it was to me. And so it sounds like a very similar situation. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
So
Yeah.
were you forced to be in church for long periods of time?
Absolutely. Yeah? Absolutely.
Really?
Up to 10 or 12 hours a day, depending on, you know, what was going on in the compound. Yeah.
Wow. And so were there other, I'm guessing there were a bunch of just other couples and children. Yeah.
Yeah. In the years that I was there, you know, there was anywhere between 200 and 400, you know, like there's
wow.
right. So, you know, people came and left, and people had many, many children. Like I have 9 brothers and sisters, or there's 9 of us. So like, you know, the families were very large. And so the population multiplied very quickly when, you know, my parents joined in 1975. And by the time I left in 2004, you know, the numbers had gone up and down because people had lots of children and then people left, and, you know, so yeah, I didn't have the liberty to just leave because I actually lived in the compound, and the majority of members did not live in the compound.
Okay. So it wasn't like the adults couldn't leave if they wanted to. They could? Yeah.
I mean, you could disassociate yourself
Yeah.
from the call. Yes, absolutely. But I lived in the compound. That's the
So
difference.
yeah, you had no
Right.
choice.
But you know, unlike Waco, the members did not, we owned our own homes. We, you know, had our own houses, and then we all commuted to the central compound where we all gathered every single weekend. We all gathered there. So we would leave our homes on Friday, and we would all join at the compound, and we would stay there through the weekend and then leave late Sunday night in order to be at school and work on Monday morning.
Okay, that was my next question, actually, if everybody lived independently. So
Yes.
I'm guessing the school was right there on the compound as well, right?
So no, because we all lived independently, we commuted 4.5 hours. For my family, it was 4.5 hours. We commuted to the compound. So we all went to our own schools, or we were homeschooled. I
Oh,
went to public school, but the majority of the members were that they homeschooled their children. My parents always sent us to public school.
wow. Okay, I didn't realize that the homes were so far away from the compound. I was
Yep.
thinking like, you know, 5 minutes.
No, there were some homes that were that close, but the majority of us all commuted from 3 to 4 to 5 hours away.
Wow. So when you were at home and not at the compound, was it still a really strict environment at home with your parents?
Yes, because he still made all the rules for my family. We ate the way that he taught us to eat. We didn't have toys because those weren't allowed. We didn't have TV. We didn't have radio. We didn't have, like, all those things were forbidden. So at home, we didn't have any of the things that we didn't have at the compound because they were forbidden. You know, in my story, you'll see in the book that I wrote, like, you'll see that once I moved to North Carolina, when my family location wise moved, so we were a lot further away from the compound, my parents became a little more lax in some of those rules, just because, like, he couldn't see us. So like my parents became a little more lax, but for the most part, you know, the fear of him was always over us.
Wow. Okay. So then tell me, when was it that you decided, okay, I don't want this anymore. This is not for me. I need to make a change. And was it a
Yeah.
gradual? I'm guessing it might have been a gradual thing, right?
So no, it wasn't,
No.
because I didn't see any other way. Like, it's so hard to kind of that it was a process, because it wasn't. Like, I just didn't know any other way. I didn't see any way out. And because I lived in the compound and I worked for one of his businesses, my every move was monitored. So I didn't see a way out. And the moment that changed that for me was I found my sister, who had separated herself from the cult many years before. I found her on the internet and I started communicating with her. And we communicated for a few months. And then I found out that she was pregnant. She had just found out she was pregnant, and she did not have my parents. She didn't have her other siblings. Like, she was so alone. And something clicked in me that said, I am not letting my baby sister go through pregnancy of her first child by herself. And I just felt this need to be there with her, because my parents were still in the cult. And my siblings that had left the cult were all trying to navigate this big, crazy, scary world at the same time. And so she wasn't, didn't have a close relationship to them. And I was her big sister. And so something clicked in me that night. And I was like, come hell or high water, I will find a way out. And that's when that was my point. And then within 10 days, I planned my escape, and my guardian angel helped me, and I got out. So.
Wow. So when you talk about your escape, because you weren't actually living there with him on the compound, what was it that you were escaping from? I know.
So I was living in the compound. So I moved into the compound at age 18, because he basically called my parents 7 days after graduation and told them to deliver me to high school graduation, to deliver me to the compound, and that I was moving in with him at the compound.
Oh,
that was what my parents were told, that I was an out of sorts teen, that I was making bad life decisions, and that he was going to save the day, and he was going to take responsibility for me, and he was going to save my salvation and my life and all the things. And so 7 days after high school graduation, I moved from North Carolina back up to the compound and moved in at the compound. Yeah. So from 18 to 25, I lived in the compound, and that's why I had to escape.
Okay, that makes sense now, because I was a little bit confused, because you were saying earlier that you lived in the compound, and then you said that you had to drive to the compound. So I was a little confused about that. Okay. So, all right. So let's rewind. So when that happened, did you feel a sense of, oh, I feel honored I get to go live with him? Or was it, I don't want that?
So it was a mixed bag, right? Like, I knew that I had rebelled, and I knew the things that I had done. And I had, in my teenage years before going back to the compound, I had experimented with drugs. I had boyfriends. I had, eaten forbidden food. I had sinned, right? Like, in the outside world, like, I had been a kind of a wild teenager, because I was rebelling against all the rules, all of the rituals. I was rebelling against my parents. I was rebelling against the cult. I was just rebelling.
Yeah.
And so I did do a lot of sinning, right? So when I got that call, I did feel like, oh, he cares enough about my salvation and about my life to want to save me, right? Like, it did feel like that. And it did feel like, that this was a new chance for me, because I had kind of dug myself a hole, with the things that I had done and gotten involved with. And I was going down the wrong road. So it did feel like he was like a lifesaver, right? And so, yeah.
Okay, so then now that we know that part, let's talk about when you decided to escape, how you did it. Did anybody else know on the compound that you were planning the escape?
So I will let people read like the whole escape in the book that I wrote, but
yes. Okay.
I'll give you the Cliff Note version of the escape. So the only person that knew that I was planning my escape was my guardian angel, and his name is Papa, and he was actually from the outside. He had befriended me at the business that I worked for the cult, and he and I planned my whole entire escape, and he was the only one that knew of my escape plans. No one within the compound knew, because they would have tried to stop me. And so everything was planned and everything was gone over and prayed about. And Papa and I, talked to the people that needed to be talked to plan a safe house for me. My sister, of course, knew from the outside, but nobody on the inside knew. But at the same time, like, I knew what I was doing. And so I really tried to not leave the cult in a bad position, because I ran this company for them. And so, like, I wrote a manual for them about everything that I did on a daily basis. I did inventory lists. Like, I really tried to leave them in a good place, because I felt like I was sinning against the cult by leaving, right? For my own selfish purposes of going home to be with my sister. So, it was, again, a mixed bag. It would be years before I realized, like, no, like, that was my point of, like, I'm done. This is not what I want anymore. And but at that time, of course, hindsight's 2020. I didn't know it was a cult.
Wow. So when you say your guardian angel, do you mean that in the figurative sense, or?
No, he was a real person, but he was such a divine human, and that came into my life during just that season of my life. And he was the first person to ever tell me about love, and to tell me about Jesus, and tell me about, like, mercy and grace. Like, the God that we knew in the cult was angry and mad, and made you pay for your sins and all these things. And Papa, he gave me a different side of God. He showed me that God was different, and that God did love me, and that God was here for me, and he didn't have, he's not out to hurt me. And so he befriended me in a way that I'd never trusted another person, right? Like, he was an elderly man. He became like my grandpa that I didn't have, because I didn't have extended family, because that wasn't allowed in the cult. So Papa was like, he was just a very, very special human to me. And he is the reason why I eventually was able to escape, because he provided the escape car. He provided me money, because I had not a cent to my name, because I worked for the cult and you didn't get paid. So, like, Papa is he is a guardian angel in a figurative sense, but also in a very literal, like, he is the reason why I get to do what I get to do now.
Wow. Do you still talk to him?
So he's passed on, but I
Oh,
did get about 9 years with him before he passed on. So, and he got to see me kind of figure out my way. And he was always my biggest fan and my biggest cheerleader.
oh, that's so awesome. I love that so much. Okay, so now let's talk about, like you said, people can read the full story in the book, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So if you want to hear details, you must get Martha's book. But I'm guessing maybe not. Did it go off without a hitch? Like, there was no problems, and you get out and
Oh, so that's the divine power of timing, right? Like, it was divine timing, and God sent, like, a wicked snow blizzard, and, like, what should have been really, really difficult was so easy. It was so easy because of this blizzard. Like, again, you'll read it in the book,
yeah.
but everything went without a hitch, and everything was just so easy because the timing was right, and it was just like God parted the seas, and I just walked on out. So you'll have to read that.
Yeah, I do. I can't wait. I can't wait. Did he, the leader, did he try to get you back once he realized you were gone?
Yes, and I was hunted for probably close to 3 months. They looked for
Really?
me, and I had to hide. Generally, you weren't hunted in that way, because I lived in the compound, and because I knew a lot, and a lot had happened to me, that he did send people to try to find me for quite some time. And I don't know the exact number of weeks or months that he looked for me, but it was 3 months before I felt comfortable that they had stopped coming to my family's houses, and they had stopped kind of actively trying to get me back. I would have one more run-in with him when I went to visit Papa one time, that he tried to convince me that I had, sinned, and that I needed to come back. And that's the first and only time that I ever stood up to him and was like, no, I'm not coming back. So, and that was our last communication that I ever had with him.
Wow. Now, are your parents still involved or?
So no, my parents got out about 6 months after I did. And that was kind of I was a catalyst for that, because I came to my dad, and after I was hiding for about 3 months, and I sat down with my dad and I just told him all the things that had happened to me in the 8 years that I was in the compound. And he was just flabbergasted. He's like, this is not what me and mom signed up for. Like this, we had no idea that these things were happening to you. And within a very short time, my parents made the decision to leave as well. And so they've been rebuilding their lives for the last 19 years now too.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so how long is it? It's been 19 years since you've been out? Is it?
So I've been out about 19 and a half years. Yep.
Wow. So you mentioned earlier, right when we first started talking about all of the abuse that you endured. Now, was that all while you were in the compound?
So the abuse, the physical abuse started when I was like 7, like from him. Like it was just, it was more physical discipline, from in his eyes, like, we were just very physically disciplined. But then when I moved to the compound, everything was kind of just exponential, grew just more than it had ever been in those years. And then I was an adult, right? I was 18, and yet the physical abuse was far greater than it was when I was a child. But I think that was because he was trying to break me, like he was trying to break my spirit. He was trying to get me to submit. He was trying to kind of keep control of me, because I was hard-headed, and I had a really, really strong spirit of like, like, you can't break me. And I didn't understand that would be what would help me heal, at that time, because I cursed my strong spirit. I wanted to like break, because I didn't like being abused, right?
Right.
But I didn't understand that resilience and that fortitude and that strong spirit would actually serve me in the outside. So
Wow. What an amazing story. So talk a little bit about once you're out, um, where did you go? Where did you go? It probably took you a while to be able to be on your own, I'm guessing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
yeah, so again, everything was just kind of divinely happened, and doors opened, and it was just easy when I first got out, right? Like I hid for several months with my best friend from middle school, who hadn't seen or heard from me in the 8 years that I was in the compound, and she invited me to live with her and her young son and her mom. And I hid there for about 3 months until I could save enough money to get a place on my own. And by day 2 of being back in North Carolina, I got a job, and I just started saving my money, and just started rebuilding my life, because for me, I needed a purpose, right? Like I hadn't made money in so many years because I worked for the cult. So I just needed to just get and grind, right? And I just needed something to do to take my mind off of everything that I had just left behind, and all the 8 years of torture and torment that I had experienced. And I just needed to focus. And that's what I did. I just worked and saved and worked and saved. And then within 3 months, I was able to afford my own place, and I just continued to work and save. And then I just kept running from all of the stuff, right? I kept running from the stuff. And it wasn't long before I started making the same bad decisions that I had made in high school, with drugs and men and alcohol and all the things, right? And then that kind of took me into this tailspin of bad decisions. And that was kind of eventually what led to the unraveling of my life, when I had to start really looking inward and saying, there's got to be a reason why I keep making these decisions. And for me, my physical health took a turn, and I was grossly overweight. I had GI issues. I had migraines. I had chronic pain. I had fibromyalgia. I had, like, the list of diagnoses just kept piling up, until I finally looked and was like, I gotta do something. I gotta take my life back. And so, yeah, it was a road though. It was a many, many long years of one devastation after another of like running from myself.
Wow. So how did you make that transformation? Was it through therapy or life coach, or did you do it on
So,
your own?
yeah. So, the very short answer to that very, very in-depth question is I tried to start therapy. I guess I was out of the cult about 2.5, 3 years. And I went to a therapist, and I went with her to her 3 times. And on my fourth visit, she looked at me straight in the eyes and she was like, Martha, I just don't even know where to start with you. I've never talked to anybody or treated anybody from a cult. And I just feel like you're outside of my scope of practice. And I just don't feel like I can continue to treat you. And talk about like daggers. I was just like, well, what? And like,
Wow.
and I was devastated. And I was like, I'm so broken that not even a professional can help me.
Oh
And
my,
I was just like, it took me, I never went back to talk therapy because of that. And I had to find other means to heal. But also, like, fast forward, when I started getting sick, my physical body started getting sick. Like, I was bounced around the healthcare system from one specialty to another, because everybody was just looking at me from their scope of practice, right? Like, okay, you have migraines, go to neurology. You have gastrointestinal issues, you go to the
yeah.
everybody was looking at me from their scope of practice, and nobody was just looking at the whole Martha going, you know what really is your issue? You're a traumatized little girl stuck in an adult body that is running from herself, her trauma, her past. And you got to get inward. You got to look inside. You got to start healing from the inside out. And so what happened was, I was a massage therapist at that time, and I started taking continuing education. And I was in this class, and they made this comment about trauma being stored on a cellular level. And I was like, that's me. It was like red lights, sirens. And I was like, what? That's me. Like that. And that changed the trajectory of my life, because I realized that Western medicine was not going to give me a pill to fix what was really going on with me.
Right.
And so I started doing research. I started trying modalities that I found, got information about, like EMDR, cognitive therapy, biofeedback, neurofeedback, Reiki, hypnotherapy, like, craniosacral. Like, I tried all of these different, holistic therapies, and I started making progress. And I started seeing that the outward manifestation of that inward problem started to alleviate as well. Right. And I was like, holy crap, everything's connected. Everything's connected. And it just snowballed from there. When I started doing the inward work, the outward started to be affected positively as well. And that I just was like, okay, now I'm committing, because every time that I would find a modality that worked, I would get to a point, and then it was like, okay, it's time to start trying something else. And then I would try something, it would peel back a layer, I would do a little bit more healing, and then I would try something else. And it was a beautiful, beautiful process of finding me. And that's what it was, is I had to find who Martha Glory was. And it was a very difficult, arduous, painful uncovering. But I'm so proud of the person that I found underneath all of the labels, all of the diagnosis, all of the pain, was this beautiful little gem of a human that God has created perfectly and wonderfully. And now I get to share it with others. So
Oh, I love that. So you did it all the work, all the hard work. You just did, you dove in and did it yourself. I love that.
I did.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. And so
Yeah.
now you're sharing that with others. Yes.
Yeah.
So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So about 3 years ago, when I finally was like, it feels good to know me. It feels good to love me. It feels good to look in the mirror and say, damn, you rock. You worked your butt off, and you're here where you are because of that. You loved yourself enough to do it. And so I decided to get my certification for life coaching and health coaching. And that really just opened up doors for me to be able to say, give back, right? For me to be able to resonate with other people's pain and say, hey, been there, done that, have that experience. Here's how we can navigate this together. And just knowing what's in my tool belt, in my arsenal, and being able to give that to others and say, you don't have to do all of the searching and finding and deep diving that I had to do in order to find my healing, like here's a roadmap. And so now I get to do that. And so I've created a trauma recovery program, and the principles are actually in my book as well. So people can read those in the book as well. But now I'm really excited to be able to offer my clients a way to reconnect with themselves in that very sacred space of like, who were you created to be? Who do you want to be? Because you can rewrite your story at any time. All it takes is a decision. All it takes is loving yourself enough to peel back the layers and find at the core of your being who you are and who you want to be.
Wow. I love that. And so when was it that you decided that you wanted to write a book, and what was that process like?
So as I was going through this healing journey, and this healing journey has been about the last 12 years, as I was going through this, everybody that I met with was like, you got to write a book. And I'm like, yeah, got to write a book, right? So I met with a life coach about 7-8 years ago, and he was like, you got to start journaling. You got to start getting this stuff out, because, by that time, I was less connected to the pain and I was more invested in myself. But he was like, it's therapeutic, it's cathartic to just write it down. Just write it down. And so I started writing when I was seeing him about 7 or 8 years ago. And then when I finished with him, it just kind of, got put away. And so after I became a health coach and I started to coach clients, and I started to continue with my own coaching, I kept being reminded, like, there's this book and you could really use it to not only promote your business, but really to just get your story out, right? Because people, again, kept just saying, why don't you write this? And so I was in Nashville this March of 2024, and I was at a conference, and everything just kind of came together at one time. And my mentor, my coach, Dr. Lauren Michaels, he was like, you got to write this book. You got to get it from in here, and you got to get it out. You got to compile it. It's time to do this. Like, you got to stop talking about it. No more excuses. And he had given me this swift kick in the butt. And so when I went to Nashville, and then everything kind of all collided together, and that was when I was like, all right, let's do it. And so 23 days later, the book was finished.
Wow. I didn't realize it was that recent. Oh my God.
I wrote the book in 23 days. Yep.
And you didn't take it from like he had said, you didn't start journaling previously and take some excerpts from that. You just wrote it.
So I did. So a lot of the journaling that I had done years ago is in the book, because it was all, but I had to, like, the majority of it I had to recreate because it didn't fit in the, I wrote the book in 23 days. Some of it was from the journals that I had written so many years ago. But yeah. Wow. But also a lot of life had been lived in those 7 or 8 years since I had journaled. And so I had to, all of that was new. But it was so, when the timing's right, when the divine timing's right, it's easy. And until then, it's hard. It's like, I say, it's like going uphill with your boots full of mud, right? Like, it's when the timing's not right, it's just hard. So, and this is just proof of that, right? The timing was right, and everything came together at the right time. And the momentum was there, and it was time to get it from in here out into the world, because there's other people that need to hear my story, because they will resonate with their own pain, with their own suffering, with their own trauma, and find hope. And that's my mission, is to allow others to see my story and to find hope, to find light, to find love, and to understand they're not alone. Like, my journey was very, very lonely for many, many years. And I want to help others in any way that I can for their journey to be less lonely.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And what's the name of your book?
Glory, Going All In. So Going All In is my coaching program, and Glory is my middle name. So Glory,
Okay.
Going All In.
So when you say Martha Glory, that's actually your middle name.
Yes.
Okay. Oh,
Yep.
what a great middle name.
Thanks.
So now I'm curious, now that the book is out, is the cult that you were in, are they still functioning?
Yes.
Do you anticipate any backlash because of your book?
Um, so it's very possible. And I did not use names. I changed names of anybody that's still in the cult. And I still have a sister there. So I had to tread very lightly with the things that I said. So I didn't use specific locations. I changed names of anybody that could sue me. Because I have to protect myself, but I also really wanted to be as authentic and honest as possible to share my story. So yes, I've been very careful with the way that I'm getting the information out. And
Yeah.
I I am very aware that yes, it will be out in the world, and yes, somebody there may read it. And I hope they do. I hope they do. Maybe it'll open their eyes.
Wow. So now is that all you're doing? Are you an author now, or besides your life coaching, is this something you're going to pursue?
So I feel like there are more books in me,
Yeah.
but right now I am coaching and I'm also speaking. So I've started. I didn't realize how much I love speaking, and I love sharing my message of the love and the light. And I want to encourage others. I want to inspire others. So I'm doing the coaching and the speaking, and we'll see what the future holds for another book. But right now I'm focusing on coaching and speaking.
That's awesome. So, the whole premise of the podcast here and how it applies to you is quite significantly different than for most people. It's born or made. Are we born with an entrepreneurial spirit, or, are we made over time? And so for you, I mean, you were absolutely, I feel like maybe you were born because you had that rebellious personality anyway, but you didn't know how to manifest it at that time. Right. And
Yes.
so now that you're free and living a great life, being an entrepreneur is what feels natural to you. Is that fair
Right.
to say?
Absolutely. And that entrepreneurial spirit really comes from my dad. My dad has always owned his own businesses, and six out of nine of us own our own businesses, which is huge for a family of our size. I'm really, really proud of my siblings and I for being able to do this entrepreneurial thing. So I think definitely what, like you said, we saw it growing up, my dad navigating the hardships of owning his own business and being an entrepreneur, but also living this big, beautiful life now, right? It was worth it in the long run for him. And so I think all of us kids got a piece of that. And I'm kind of the odd duck where I'm not doing anything that is even close to what my dad did. All of my other siblings kind of did offshoots of what my dad has done over the years. But I learned so much about business and about entrepreneurship from my dad.
Well, what was it that he did? What kind of business?
So he started out as a custom woodworker, like, making furniture and things like that. And then he moved into the polyurethanes, and then he moved into signs. And like what he does is so far over my head that I can't even pretend to understand it. But he has lots of patents and things and done, created things that, again, are over my head. But it's beautiful.
That's great. And so are you guys all in North Carolina? You all live close together, or?
So there's six of us in North Carolina, plus my parents. And then I have some family on the West Coast in Washington State, and I have a brother in Virginia, but most of us are here in North Carolina.
Well, that's awesome. And you said you still have a sister that's involved in the cult. Now, do you think that she's going to try to leave at some point, or?
I mean, that's always our prayer, right?
Yeah.
Like we have, that's our intentional prayer, is that she eventually will remember the love of her family, and that we are always here, and that our doors are always open. We are a phone call away. I tell everybody that ever asks me about her. All she has to do is call or text me, and I will drop what I'm doing, rent a U-Haul, and go pick her up. It's that easy. And no, but I wouldn't ask any questions. So if she ever watches this podcast, call me and I'll rent a U-Haul. Let's go.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, maybe she'll see the book.
That's my
Uh,
prayer.
That's, well, I will definitely pray for that too. That is
Thank you.
awesome.
Thank
All right.
you.
Well, Martha, we're coming sort of to the end here, but what I do at the end of all of my interviews is I try to think of a few random questions just so that we can get to know you better. So the one I always ask everyone is, if you were given the opportunity to go to space and walk on the moon, would you?
No. And the
Yeah.
reason for that is I am all about the collective. And so unless I could take the collective with me, I don't want a lonely experience.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think the collective would probably want to go.
No. So until the collective can go, I'm staying here.
Okay. All right. And then the next one is if you could have dinner with anyone in the world, alive or dead, who would it be?
I would have dinner with Hoda Kotb.
Oh,
She is such a beautiful soul that radiates love and light and kindness. And she is just, she's who I would want to have dinner with. I have so many just feelings of understanding her kind of her plight, and becoming a mother in her 50s. Like, these are all things that I just she's so inspirational, and she would be my choice. So Hoda Kotb, if you're listening, I would like to have dinner with you.
that was such a quick answer. Usually it takes people a few minutes to decide.
Nope, she's on my vision board. I'd like to be interviewed by her, but even better, I'd like to go for dinner with her.
That's awesome. Well, if it's on your vision board, it's going to happen for sure.
There you go.
When the timing is right.
That's right. Divine timing.
Awesome. And then the next one is, weird for you because you're an author, but what one book has inspired you most in your life, would you say?
What book? I would say The Four Agreements is the book that has made the biggest difference in my life. Either The Four Agreements or the book by The Masters. The whole collection by Brian Weiss. Those books, I am captivated. I carry them around in my heart because it's all about our whole journey, right? It's all about understanding who we are at a soul level, on an energetic level, of really understanding our responsibility to ourselves and to humanity, and understanding energetically that we live on forever. So what are we doing that's important now? Because it matters. And so I'm trying to make this time here in this human form, I want to make it count. So
That's awesome. I'll have to check those out.
yeah.
Now, if people want to find out more about you, where should they? It's going to be in the show notes, of course, but can you tell everyone how to find you?
Yeah, so they can go to my website, which is PICWellnessLLC.com, or you can also go to letgloryshine.com. Those are my websites, and that's also how you'll purchase my book. Or you can go on Amazon after June 11th and purchase my book on Amazon. Or you can email at PICWellnessLLC.com.
Okay. Well, Martha, thank you so much for coming on today. I could have sat and talked with you for hours, but I'm sure you want people to read your book rather than for them to watch this podcast. So yeah. So thank you so much. And I just wish you all the best with everything you're doing.
Thank you so much. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much.